So given the Vegan Gains channel takedown yesterday, I have re-evaluated my videos and content and have removed a number of videos for fear that my channel will be targeted. Over the last 12 to 15 hours or so, I've seen a number of comments like this one saying that my channel should be targeted for apparently consistently lying and peddling fake medical tests. So I want to discuss this, why I'm taking down 4 of my videos, and I will also show the science surrounding the testing methods that I currently use. So first of all, the videos I've removed from my channel are my case study videos. These are the only videos on my channel now that could fall into a grey area under the new community guidelines. So when I see such threats about content strikes against my channel, I need to do this to protect my channel so I can continue to make the content I love making. Now, I will absolutely continue with these case studies. I just need to assess which platform is best to put these on, whether that be Instagram or host them on my own website. So with that in mind, I want to quickly discuss the tests I use, the science that supports using them, and some wider issues that have been raised against me and my channel. I've been labelled a quack, a fraud, a fake, anti-medicine, arrogant, and everything in between, so I want to cover all of this off. So as my channel has grown quite quickly over the last few months, I get the occasional email or troll messages questioning my integrity on YouTube, calling me anti-medicine, calling out the validity of the testing methods I use, and everything in between. So today I'm going to cover all of this off in a single video. So one of the main pushbacks that I often get from the vegan community is when I question some of the things that plant-based doctors say. People mistake my comments as me thinking that I know more than these doctors, or it's just me trying to drum up some publicity. Both couldn't be further from the truth. Let me explain the only time I've questioned statements made by Dr. McDougall and Dr. Greger. So here is what I actually said about Dr. McDougall and Dr. Greger. So firstly, Dr. McDougall wrote a newsletter 18 months ago or so on Sibo, saying that Sibo is a new fad diagnosis and it's really just IBS or similar gut problems. Then in a follow-up webinar, this is what Dr. McDougall said.
Now, there really is something called a small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. I've seen it. It occurs when you do stomach operations for obesity. You have to take part of your intestine out, and you don't have the advantage of the stomach killing the bacteria. Say you take the stomach out. We used to do this all the time for ulcers. Then you get small bacteria overgrowth. If you have pouches called diverticuli in the stomach area or the small intestine area, you can get these pouches. They get infected with bacteria. So it's a condition that does occur, but it's extremely rare. I saw it when I was a young medical student, but I haven't run across it since then. Anyway, that was last month's newsletter that I wrote about, was about SIBO. Let's see what I said about it.
I do have, whenever you want, I have some questions for you.
All right, and that would be nice. There's something called the specific carbohydrate diet that's being used, which again is a low carbohydrate diet that restricts the healthy foods you should be eating. And there's a popular diet out there called Fodmap, which stands for fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. So there are a couple dietary plans out there, but what you need to do if you're having these kind of problems is you need to fix the food. The problem's the food. You need to be eating a starch-based diet.
Now at the time I questioned Dr. McDougall's statements around SIBO and IBS, etc. His answer to fix these type of issues is a starch-based diet free of processed refined foods and oils. While I'm a massive fan of his dietary approaches, for people with IBS and SIBO, this advice is reckless and not supported by the science. As per his starch solution book, starches consist of whole grains, legumes or starchy vegetables. So what we are talking about is rice, quinoa, wheat, millet, oats, potatoes, pasta, whole grains, cereals, beans, lentils, etc, etc. So as I said just now, Dr. McDougall's recommendations on starch-based foods for IBS are not supported by the science. So for example, in the UK, the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, basically where the NHS gets its guidance from, says this: there is inconsistent and conflicting evidence on the benefit of fibre for treating IBS symptoms in the literature. The recommendations on adjusting fibre intake according to the predominant stool type and reducing insoluble fibre are based on the NICE clinical guidelines, which notes that a universal high fibre diet can often cause adverse effects and may worsen symptoms in people with IBS. Likewise, the Association of UK Dietitians advice for people experiencing bloating and wind with IBS type issues are to limit the intake of gas-producing foods such as beans and pulses, Brussels sprouts and cauliflower. It's why the NHS and many other health organisations around the world recommend the low Fodmap approach to IBS. As the NHS says on its website, this involves avoiding foods that aren't easily broken down by the gut, such as some types of fruits and vegetables, milk and wheat products. So this is why I question the validity of what Dr. McDougall said about Sibo and IBS. Not because I think he doesn't understand gut health, but simply because I don't think he is up to date with the scientific consensus on Sibo or IBS. In defence of Dr. McDougall, yes, there will be some whose IBS would be improved by increased fibre, but speak to the majority of vegans and non-vegans with IBS and tell them to increase their fibre intake and see what type of response you get. And this is something that I see from both vegan and non-vegan patients on a daily basis. So until you've reached the root cause of IBS, such as Sibo, then simply telling people who struggle to consume fibre to eat more is an absurd approach to take. And again, in response to Dr. McDougall's comments about Sibo being a bogus disease, I will cover the science later in the video, but again, I think he is way off here. Now, I've also made similar comments about Dr. Greger and his dietary advice about oxalates over the last 10 years or so, and largely speaking, he has said this about oxalates.
What about cutting down on oxalates, which are concentrated in certain vegetables? A recent study found that there was no increased risk of stone formation with higher vegetable intake. In fact, greater dietary intake of whole plant foods, fruits and vegetables, were each associated with a reduced risk independent of other known risk factors for kidney stones, meaning one may get additional benefits bulking up on plant foods in addition to just restricting animal foods.
Then, as he is caught up with the science, he recently said this.
And so same thing with this. For people who are doing the right thing and eating cups of greens a day, as we all should, dark green leafy vegetables, I encourage people to stick to low oxalate dark green leafy, so that's basically all greens, with the exception of beet greens, Swiss chard, and spinach. All those three greens are fantastic greens. I eat all those greens, and I enjoy all those greens. But if you're eating cups a day, then I would encourage people to, go with kale and collards and arugula and mustard greens, all these other wonderful greens out there, bok choy. And the concern is with kidney stones. The video, probably a series of videos, will come up about it, and so you can look at all the detail and click on the links and read all the PDFs yourself and make up your own mind, but I just want to give that heads up. That's in the newsletter as well.
So as you can see, when I do criticise or question plant-based doctors, it's usually when I believe they are not up to date with the science. It's not that I think that I know more than these doctors or anything like that. It's simply because what they are saying, based on up-to-date science, is factually inaccurate. The next type of comment I typically get is that I am anti-medicine and that my idea to develop a vegan healthcare app system in my last video is dangerous. I get messages along the lines of, do you think you know more than doctors working in the NHS around gut health? Again, no, this is not something that I believe or have ever said. This is what I actually said in my last video about setting up a vegan virtual healthcare system. So imagine you've been vegan for 12 months and your digestion has been getting progressively worse. You jump on YouTube and stumble across some videos around gut health and Sibo, etc. You think this newfound information would explain a lot and you head to your doctor with a self-diagnosis and ask for testing for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Your doctor then looks at you like you have two heads because he graduated from medical school in 1974 and has never heard of Sibo. He then looks at you again and says, let's just call it IBS. And I stand by these comments. So most GPs and doctors are unaware of Sibo unless they are newly qualified or an experienced consultant. Therefore, unless you get referred to a gastro consultant, then you will be unlikely to be tested for Sibo if you have IBS, and this is a massive problem. Now again, I will cover the science of Sibo off later in the video, But this isn't voodoo science. The hydrogen and methane breath tests that I provide are the same identical ones offered by the NHS and other healthcare systems around the world. In fact, the latest publication by the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence in the UK, again the body which provides the NHS with its guidelines for the treatment of IBS and other gut issues, says this. In its May 2018 paper on 50 studies on the prevalence and predictors of small intestinal bacterial overgrowth in IBS, a meta-analysis, the researchers found overall pool prevalence of Sibo in IBS was 38% and was higher among individuals with IBS compared with controls. The pool prevalence of Sibo in IBS was higher in studies diagnosed by breath tests at 40% compared with cultures at 19%. The researchers concluded that more than 1/3 of IBS patients tested positive for Sibo, and the odds of Sibo in IBS were increased by nearly 5-fold. The prevalence of Sibo varied according to the diagnostic modality performed, with female gender, older age and IBS diarrhea, but not PPI use, were associated with Sibo among individuals with IBS. So again, going back to my main point, I never said that the NHS is totally unaware of the science of gut health. I simply said that doctors today are not aware of the prevalence rates of Sibo in IBS patients, and this is very true. Now, the prevalence of IBS in the UK alone is currently sat around about 17%. That would mean of the 17% of the UK population with IBS, approximately 1/3 or 1/5 of those IBS patients have Sibo as the driving factor. So just in the UK alone, of the 11 million IBS patients, 4 million or so currently have Sibo driving or contributing to their IBS. So again, this is why I called out Dr. McDougall's comments on Sibo, as well as many other doctors. I am not anti-medicine, but just because I am pro-medicine, it doesn't mean that I will never criticise medicine and doctors when I see failures in the system. Other comments that I typically get are from those saying that the tests that I use are not scientifically validated, or that I am almost glamorising the tests as a magic bullet to help fix people's health issues. In other words, I'm giving people false hope. So on that point, if I am giving people hope where there is genuine possibility for them to recover or improve, then I make absolutely no apology for that. Never do I ever say to someone that my tests are a magic bullet. What I do say to people though is that if it is Sibo or a similar gut issue that is driving their gut and health issues, then it is totally possible to fix these issues and get back to a fairly normal way of eating without having to turn your back on veganism. If there is no underlying gut issues, or they have IBS, Crohn's or an incurable disease diagnosed by their doctor that can't be improved or fixed, then I will always have that conversation with that person. But in my honest, humble opinion, I think that these type of people are in the minority and not the majority. So next to the tests that I use, and I often get labelled as a quack naturopath using naturopathic treatments, I am not a naturopath and I use no such treatments. I am a nutritionist. The lactulose breath test that I use is the same identical test that the NHS use, along with most healthcare organisations around the world, to diagnose Sibo. The comprehensive stool test that I use is an amalgamation of tests used in the NHS and most healthcare organisations around the world. It covers inflammation markers such as lactoferrin, calprotectin, lysozyme, white blood cells, secretory IgA, red blood cells, etc, etc. The stool test also detects parasites, etc, using identical markers as the NHS and other healthcare organisations around the world. And then we come to the organic acids test, which is a bit more of an innovative test, but uses many of the same things that the NHS uses to assess health. So for example, the oxalic acids and the glyceric and glycolic acids can identify if a person has a genetic condition called hyperoxaluria, where they can't metabolize oxalates properly in the body. It also looks at things like the pathways for converting short-chain fatty acids into neurotransmitters such as serotonin and dopamine, etc. Are these tests perfect? Absolutely not. Are NHS tests perfect? Absolutely not. Are either tests fraudulent in nature? Absolutely not. Are there people who use these tests in a fraudulent way to make money? Absolutely. And does that mean every doctor or nutritionist who uses them is a fraud? Absolutely not. Now, I don't blame healthcare systems for being swamped. I blame education and people taking little responsibility for their health and eating poor diets, etc. And therefore, in those situations, if I have to make YouTube videos to make people aware that they might be one of those third of people who have Sibo and other issues that is driving their IBS, etc., then I make absolutely no apologies for it. So to summarise, I have not, nor will I ever mock plant-based doctors around general health issues that I know nothing about. Where I see them making certain claims or recommendations that I believe to be inaccurate, I will absolutely always talk up about it. I am not a conspiracy theorist who believes the earth is flat, and I do not use bogus testing methods. So that's the end of today's video. I hope you all enjoyed. As always, remember to look after your body because it's the only place you have to live. And I'll see you next time.